And Evan's all set to start recording and broadcasting.
Okay, great. All right, so I think we are all here, and it is after 7:30. So why don't we go ahead and get started for the evening? So I'll call to order the meeting of the Superintendent Goals and Evaluation Subcommittee on Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. We're meeting remotely in accordance with Governor Baker's alterations to the open meeting law. And this meeting is being recorded. So continuing participation in this meeting facilitates consent to you being recorded. So the first item on the agenda is to take a motion to approve the minutes of the October 28th, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Can move, yes.
Second.
Moved and seconded, okay. So are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? Speaking of minutes, do we have a volunteer to actually take the minutes for?
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay, thank you, Larry. So we'll take a roll call vote. Member Kirschenbaum?
Yes.
Member Williamson? I'll take that as a mouth reading yes. Member Woodland?
Yes.
And Mills, yes. I don't think you're muted, Kelly, but I just didn't hear any sound when you talked for some reason. All right, so the next item on the agenda is a continued review and finalization of superintendent's proposed goal, at least the first part of it. We'll see if we get to the second part of that. So where we are with that is that superintendent shared something with me midday yesterday. When I had a chance, I fed back to him. And then some feedback. We got a new version today, and that's what we should discuss. So, Daryl, do you want to start off by talking about where you are with these goals, and then we can give you some feedback.
Yeah, so I can tell you, I also got some feedback from Member Kirschenbaum. Thank you for that. And as again, I think one of the things that's been helpful for me, because my brain has just been in many other places over the past 6-7 months, is just bringing it back to, action items associated with really what we're looking at. So one of the helpful parts of what, Ken shared with me yesterday was the fact that when we were looking at 4 goals, really we were looking at 5 goals. So that communication goal was kind of getting merged into the goal around why are students leaving? And I think we had tried to do that because we were trying to meet the needs of a couple of people when we started to think about this, and it was something that was on my mind as well. So when I broke the goals down, what I shared with you earlier today is a 5-goal plan. And those goals kind of tie back to what we had already kind of looked at. And they're a little more explicit, but at the same time, I think a lot of the information in there is similar to what we had talked about the last time around. So Ken, would you like me just to, I guess, much of what I'm kind of looking at. So some of the information that, Laura had shared, which is helpful, is kind of looking at action verbs associated with, the different action steps and what needs to happen as we kind of go through this, rather than just assess or survey. We were looking at, really elaborating on what terminology we use so that it's something that's tangible ultimately for people as they kind of go through this, and they look at it from the vantage point of a school committee member who needs to approve this, or as a community member saying, hey, so what the heck is the superintendent really trying to do, in terms of his goals for the year, and how does that then translate down into my child's classroom or the school for my son or daughter? So
So let me just process-wise, just 2 things. One, I just wanted to, the version I got last night there, I think Daryl is right that there were 2 goals that were really just still the last goal was still 2 goals. I know we had discussed last time perhaps getting rid of one of those goals, which we can discuss as we get to it. But the way I saw it last night, it was really still kind of mushed together. So I respect that he put it into 2 goals. We should talk about whether 5 is the right number or not. Can I suggest, Daryl, though, that you we have a PDF version, right? So speaking of verbs, if we're going to get to the finalized verb, I think we're going to need to see the changes live. So could you, I assume you have some sort of like Word or Google Doc version of this that perhaps you could share so that we can see how this is changing real time rather than, you know, I'm just concerned that if we give you feedback and we leave the meeting and we don't see how it's changing, we're going to start thinking about having another meeting on Monday night, which I'm not there for, by the way. So it'd be better if we could try and, you know.
Oh, I totally agree. Do you want me to share, you're saying share the screen, Ken?
Yeah, share the screen with not a PDF, but share the screen with something that can be
With the
edited.
document that I shared today, yeah, because what I did was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's great. If we can just work as we go tonight.
Yeah.
Efficiently.
Okay. Efficiently.
Give me 2 secs. Is it working? Okay, you got it? So that
I'm talking. So we can go to the goal. Good.
I'm sorry, Ken, I can't say that again.
Good. We're at the goal. So let's go through the goal first and look at the action steps.
Sure. So the goal, by June 2021, the superintendent and his team will provide an outline identifying and prioritizing improvements to technology, resource acquisition, community outreach, communication, and best practices to inform the next strategic plan. Now, Laura, the document that you shared with me, I can't have that open and this open at the same time. Otherwise, I'm going to be going back and forth. So
Yeah.
do you want to just talk through that with me, and I can just kind of walk it through as I work through this?
Yeah, that's excellent. We can do that. I think that's the most efficient thing since the other one didn't really format very well. So I have a question about this, the goal. I circled in my notes the terminology that we have best practices now. I think I can't get my hands on the original version, but I think we had talked about modern classroom.
We had.
And I'm not opposed to the change of that terminology, but I think that putting some sort of adjective in front of that is a good idea. So maybe like instructional best practices or educational best practices, so that we kind of understand what's going to drive this strategic plan, right? It's the improvement to educational process for the kids, or instructional process, or whatever we're trying to do here. I don't know, but well, I know, but I hope that we're on the same page. But
Yes.
I think that putting in something like educational best practice, maybe we don't have to define that quite as much as we had to with the modern classroom ideas. Best practice is a terminology that, you know, happens all the time in education. So, you know, we might be speaking a common language with that.
I agree. Ken had talked about best practices as well. I think the modern learning, when you start to look up, you know, spend time looking at modern learning, you know, there are a lot of variables associated with what constitutes modern learning. So, and again, I think people will have different interpretations ultimately. So I think this kind of aligns with educational best practices in terms of continuity of language and understanding.
Yeah, and I'm content with the way that words, you know, that wording is right now. I mean, we could wordsmith it and go even further, but I think that would be sort of beating it to death.
Yeah. Are other people okay with the goal itself, just the statement?
I think the goal itself is fine for me. I don't know if all the action points follow from the goal, but
Yeah, that's fine.
or the action points I think are narrowly focused on one part of it, but we can get to that. So I don't know if that's a problem with the action points or the goals, but yeah.
So we can go down to the action points then. That I can't see if people are nodding or not, so because I'm just looking at my screen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and goal I think is in a good place for me as well.
Okay. And Kelly, you're all set with it, and Linda.
Yeah, that looks great. Sorry.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. So again, action steps. So basically, assessing what is working in remote learning, and part of this was just around conversations with building level administration and district level administration in terms of the delivery and instruction, what might need to change, and then ultimately how do we assess the learning that's occurring. Underneath that next bullet, through assessment of student learning, specify areas that are working well. And that really comes down to what areas are working well in terms of remote student learning for our kids right now. That next bullet, examining various learning models currently being utilized. And again, it's split in comparable school districts. So what other models in terms of kind of that remote learning is really working in other places, and how are they making it work? And what could we maybe glean from those districts? And then finally, an outline is developed and shared with the committee that's basically goes through what we talk about up here in this top goal around prioritizing improvements for technology, resource acquisition, outreach, and educational best practices for the strategic plan. So feel free to chime in here and we can make the modifications as necessary.
So, so my feedback to Daryl earlier this evening, just to give you some information that's not reflective in this particular document. My advice is to make sure that the action steps begin with some sort of an action verb, and have some measurable outcome embedded in that action step. So, for example, in the second one, I'm suggesting begin with assess how learning is occurring best, and identify areas that are working well and areas needing improvement. So in my mind, at the end of that action step, we know what they're doing, they're assessing, but then we also know that the tangible outcome, in my mind, is the identification of the strengths and the weaknesses of what's happening now. So,
Laura, could you just read that last? Assess how learning has occurred best and...
So assess how learning is occurring best.
Oh, okay.
And identify, and I'm trying to use what you had here, so it's not a complete rewrite. Identify areas that are working well and areas needing improvement.
I don't know if this is a corollary to Laura's quest for verbs. I will point out, if we can have, this is the English part of me wants to say, make sure you have parallel construction through this, because you don't. Sometimes it's present, sometimes it's, anyway, so try to fix that. But I want the object as well. So for me, I'd like a work product for the actions.
Right.
So for me, like, you're assessing, but is there a report? Is there a product? I would just want to know, like, what am I expecting to look at, right? So I would want to say, assess how learning has occurred best, identify areas that are working well and areas in need of improvement, and share a document with whomever. It might be at that point with principals, it may not be with us yet, right? But I just want there to be like an expectation that there's a work product that we could see and say, oh, okay, well, that's where they did that, and here's the results of that somehow. Maybe it's just me, but
No, I
hear
definitely, and I want to see it. My biggest concern, and I think that goes with the verbs as well, is making sure they're tied to, I believe there's 3 action items within the goal itself, right? So we're looking at technology, well, resource acquisition, community, I guess there's 4, community outreach / communication, and best practices. So your actions have to align with those 4 things. So I think the assessment of what's working and not working, and in a something that comes out of it aligns with the best practices, right? Primarily, I just want to make sure that the other action steps do so as well. And I might be a little tangential right now, but it just really kind of struck out to me when Ken said that.
And that's what
On that, Megan, it did stick out to me, but I didn't know how to incorporate it in that particular action step, or if it was too wordy to make it so. The first action step then becomes irrelevant if that that second one is
kind of encompasses both. I agree, Laura.
It's an assessment and identifying and producing a report or some sort of document that you could parse those out into 3 different things, but I'm okay with leaving it as one thing.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think that checks the box on the best practices for learning.
Yeah,
it does, and it's pretty.
It's thorough.
It's very thorough. So it's a large action step.
And you may have similar wording if you want to keep it simple on the other stuff. You know, how you're going to gauge, you know, because the goal is to know where in, say, communication needs improvement. So how you're going to gauge what's working well. You know what I mean? So just go back. What's working well, resource acquisition, what's not, what's working well, what community outreach, what's not.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, each one of those areas. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I think that's where, when I first started off and I was saying I like the goal, but I'm not sure the action steps follow it. I think that's what I was getting at here, because when we talk about best practices, it seems like the first 3 things, maybe not communication, but at least the first 2 are ways that you're achieving those best practices, right? So it almost seems like there's a bullet point after the assessment of trying to say, okay, now what are of those other 3 things are lacking, or what do we need more of to improve what we learned, what we saw, you know, for the assessment, because we're assessing their learning and then we need to learn what they need from it. I don't know, but.
So assess how the use of technology has occurred best.
No, I think that we're assessing their learning, right? And what's
So we have
working
that,
well. And then I
right?
think the other items, at least for me, are, you know, and since I really can't see them at the moment, so like, you know, the assessment is the first thing. And then I think you're identifying what improvements in technology, resources, community outreach, you know, would help to improve that learning.
I see.
I don't know. It seems like it would come
Yes.
after assessing what's happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's sort of part of fleshing out, I think, your last bullet point, right? Of
The last bullet point.
so where you're talking about outlining, developed, and share with committee, like, to me that just kind of like seems really empty. I think what we would say there is, you know, outline what resources, including technology, better communication, whatever, are necessary to improve learning, and, you know, something along those lines might flesh that out.
Yep.
And then I'd expect to see an outline, right?
Yeah, well, so that's where I think in that last bullet point, I would say draft and outline, right? That make that action, that verb, like draft and outline, so that we know that the outcome is the outline. But I don't know. I just like having verbs at the beginning of action steps. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine.
And to corollary add on my pet peeve, examine in the previous bullet point doesn't result in an outcome. So I think, you know, create a report that examines various whatever, shows me, okay, I'm going to see something.
Then you have 2 verbs and an object. You're doing all the things.
So I guess my question is, typically if I do something like this, so the action doesn't necessarily have to result in a product. So, and because again, the ending product would be the outline associated with the resources. Could there be discussions with notes that occur? Yep. Because I think we had a former member who was always like, you know, Daryl, let us know how you're leading. Let us know what you're doing, because we have a final outcome here, but we don't know what the steps were that led to it. So the only thing I have to be careful of is promising to produce documentation that might not happen because of a million other things that are going on. That's all.
But also remember how we talked about last meeting about that delegation of responsibilities too, right? You're not saying that Darren McCall is going to be making all these outlines. Maybe someone else is in charge of X part of it. So like maybe Barry is your technology person, right? It just kind of makes sense. And he puts together some sort of outline on the technology acquisition. Bob's your best practice guy, right? So like I'm already seeing like natural places where you could delegate. So again, and I think, you know, coming back to your previous comment, like wanting you to show those leadership skills, right? Like how are you leading and what is your vision? If your vision is this document that's going to really kind of be the basis of the strategic plan, your leadership then empowers those who work around you to help you take these action steps.
Point.
But one way or the other, I think pushing you towards keeping a record of what you're doing
Helps. Yes.
helps. Like even the issue I have with things like examine is I worry at the end of the year you're going to examine it, but like what does that mean? Like how do we assess how you examined it unless there's some documentation of what that examination was? I mean, maybe report is writing reports the wrong way, but at least document an examination of various something where we can say like, oh, here's that, right? Because part of it is we do have to like assess how you did this. And I just want to make sure that we're keeping, and even aside from our assessment of your performance, I mean, I think having a written trail of what you do, is just good practice. Like we have lab notebooks, in our research lab of otherwise you just got to do everything over again, right?
That's true. It's a good point, Ken. Okay. So I'm just looking at this, just putting in, again, I'll modify the dates and so forth. So, so then I would come back through and just highlight the tech, maybe resource acquisition, community outreach, communication. Would that be something that I would carry over into that other goal, or just keep that separate?
I kind of feel like that might be a little redundant, given you have that whole communication goal. I think you could take that piece out.
Yeah, okay. I would as well.
Okay.
And this is a point I made to you yesterday, but just to say, like, I think the more this becomes a laundry list, the less it feels like a student learning goal for me as well, and more of a district improvement plan. Right. So I think if we're focusing on the assessment of, I don't know, it feels a little bit more like a student learning goal to a degree.
Right.
Maybe that's just words, but
no, it is. But yeah, they're words. But I think, as you said, Ken, it's assessing what is working for students. Assessing what learning is occurring for students and why, and how best can we help support them. So I think that's how you tie it back to that student learning goal, because I completely agree. It was becoming a laundry list and was looking more like a district improvement goal.
So I have a question about when it comes time for talking to the larger committee. And looking
Linda, I think your microphone needs to be set.
Oh.
Yeah, you're super quiet.
Sorry.
It's muffled, yeah.
Come back to me. I'll have to do that. I don't know why it says that then. Where I just was. Is this any better or no?
A little bit.
Okay.
I'm just going to turn up the volume to 11 on my end. It'll be all right.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know. I can switch to another headset actually, if that makes it. Let me just do that and I'll come back to me if you don't mind.
So if I was seeing this for the first time and just trying to anticipate what the committee might ask, is they might say, well, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about, remote learning and what we can learn from it? Are we talking about like every possible modality of learning under the sun? Is it too broad? I'm just wondering if that's a question people might have. Because it feels initially like you're talking about, okay, what have we learned from this remote environment that we can like bring forward? And then it kind of seems to shift a little bit into like everything we're doing, what works. So what was your intent?
Yeah, the intent was remote learning, as we kind of talked about what we're, could be a modality that we utilize moving into the future. So what's working, what isn't working, what can we improve upon? So we should probably have some terminology in that first goal associated with remote learning. Because you're right, it's not explicit.
So I have a concern about adding remote learning because maybe I'm a hopeful thinker, but I would like to think that there's a time in our future that we don't have to have remote learning. So if we use remote learning in this goal and in the action steps, I feel like while there are nuggets of information and learning in terms of best practices that we can bring into the future, that I would like remote learning, that terminology, to be something that's not enduring. And I feel like if we put in remote learning, it really might beg the question, well, why are we putting a whole year's worth of energy into analyzing what's working from remote learning for potentially more remote learning? I don't think that that's our intent with this, right? Our intent is to learn from the innovation that's been occurring and bring something back to when we hopefully return to some sense of normalcy.
Yes, I agree with that side of it, Laura, and I think this is really kind of twofold though, because the other aspect of remote learning moving forward could be, for example, a course at the high school that is taught remotely. So students take they learn from home, or they learn from a library, wherever it might be, but it's a remote class taught by a teacher in the school. So I think one of the things, and again, this has kind of accelerated that process, but I think one of the things we want to do is say, okay, this is something that could be used in the future. And if that were the case, how might it work best? So that's really, so I agree with the other side of it. Yeah, what can we take from this and really kind of benefit, that will benefit students and staff in the future? Because I agree, I do not think remote learning is going to be the end all for schools moving forward, but I think it could play a role in the future in some schools. And I think some students are feeling as though, okay, you know what, their remote learning is maybe a little better, maybe not, but I kind of wanted to leave it open in that sense. So I mean, I'm flexible with it, but I think Ken's point just around, okay, there's a question around what does this actually mean in terms of defining this? What are we looking at? And I think ultimately that, it was remote learning, which is where I tied it back to modern learning in that original goal a couple weeks ago.
So I'm wondering, all right, so I'm wondering if adding just a few words might make this happen, right? So when you go to inform the next strategic plan, I wonder if you, instead of just that, and tell me if I'm going crazy, what if you say like, inform the vision of the next strategic plan with a focus on, I got that modern learning term again in my head, but I get where you're going, right? So that in the future, maybe your vision for Watches in the next 5 years is that we're able to access these opportunities in a robust way that benefits kids, right? So if I'm a anxious third grader, maybe my teacher can live stream in for me, or I'm a high school student who needs to work, I can take some classes online. So right. I think you're seeing the benefit of remote learning, right? And in your head, you're saying, okay, in order to make this happen for the long term, we're going to need more resources. We need better best practices. And then this can become part of our reality where maybe we won't school choice out as much. We won't need Greenfield or TECA or anything because we can homegrown this incredible program on our own ground. So I feel like the strategic plan is just, that is also mushy, but I think what you're talking about is you're talking about crafting an outline. So when you go to the strategic planning process, you already have a vision in your head that one of these core pillars is going to be modern hybrid learning based on the lessons we learned this year, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
can I suggest the word flexible? Is that
Mhm.
was that make sense in this context? Because you're looking for the flexibility that it seemed to be what you guys are describing out of what you were talking about with modern learning and so on. It's that flexibility within the structure that seems to be the call out from having remote and hybrid experience. And what I was going to say that ties in, I think, is just about the in that assessment of what is working and so on. It looked like there was that pulling out of like what technological pieces and technical skills that have been developed in this moment that can be pulled forward.
Right. Linda, where would you think the flexibility terminology would go within the confines of that statement?
That I was thinking without putting in the exact wording placement of bouncing it off of what Megan was saying about the strategic plan. So I don't know how it fits right now, but the like feeling of it was that it would go after, so that to inform flexibility within the next street. But that's not right either. I'm sorry. Let me think about
No,
it.
I was because the word vision was good beforehand. I think flexibility is a good term as well. Improvement technology research and
I think I'd like to propose that we leave it a little more open-ended here, because if we start pigeonholing, using words that might pigeonhole the strategic plan, we're kind of writing the strategic plan before we've actually done the groundwork. And I think part of the strategic planning work is creating that vision. And so
in
I'm
the first place. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. You're right, because the vision comes from the plan.
so say strategic plan period, as opposed to that includes flexible and innovative teaching practices. Then we're sort of driving that in this committee rather than letting the process play out.
Yeah, so maybe just that vision word, right? That informs the vision of the next strategic plan.
That I would say, yeah, sure.
I try and capture the fact that we're trying to learn from our current experiences, but we don't really want to say remote learning. We could put something like newly discovered educational best practices.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good point.
Incorporates that flexibility too.
that's a good way to do it.
And I think that's good, and that gets at like what my concern was and Kelly, I think said that well, that we're not really trying to say remote learning, but we kind of are. And I think this
Right.
does, because my concern was where we were going is it made it sound like this was informing to me the entire strategic plan. Whereas this goal, I think, is a little bit more narrow of saying, okay, what have we learned this year about the way kids are learning, and what can we bring forward that might be different and new and innovative? Of course, a lot of it we might want to chuck because we don't want to go back to this ever again. But there are new innovative things we've learned from this experience. What should we bring forward into the next strategic plan? What do we need to be able to do that? Hopefully we leave most of it behind, but hopefully there's things that we don't leave behind, right?
Yeah, I like this. This actually works much better.
And you may need to express some of that, in your own way
When
to the committee when you present this.
Sure. Yeah, when I speak to it. Okay, that works. Sorry about the spacing. Scroll down. Okay, so again, we're in the 5-goal world. So if we, the other thing that we can do when we look at this is if we want to reduce it to 4, I'm fine doing that as well. By June of 2021, the superintendent, working with district and school leadership, will promote diversity, equity, and inclusion district-wide by defining and outlining sustainable practices needed to transform our culture. So I don't know if we want to Any wordsmithing or clarification people might need for this?
Well, I generally hate when you use the word define. In this point, I think if we're actually meaning it in the way the word really means, like I want to define what these practices are and like give a definition to them, I think I'm okay with that. You know, if we mean that word very specifically, right? Like this is what I mean by a sustainable practice. This is what I mean by our culture. This is what I mean by
I see what you're saying.
transformational. Like
Yep.
I think that would be super to do.
So that would be something that would happen over time. That would not happen immediately.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess that's again you get that vision thing word, right? Like that you're trying to give some vision as to like what's your goal for this, right? Like what is
Right.
your vision for what the district should be? Not the particulars and how we're going to get there, right? But like,
Right.
And that's what if that's what you mean by defining, I'm okay with it this time.
Yes.
You know, defining the vision for what our what this even is about, right? Because we can't move to action practices until we have a sense of vision.
Right. Okay. So you're okay. So leaving defining there for now is okay.
As long as we have an understanding of what that word means there.
Oh yes, I
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying with that.
Yeah.
If we scroll down, and again, Laura, I had a chance to look through it, but I didn't make modifications to any of this yet.
So I would just say in your first action step, it would be lead discussions on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So start with the verb, start with what you're going to do, right? The lead discussions. And then during monthly principal leadership team meetings or something to that effect. I know what you're going to do, and I know, essentially how you're going to do it. And so the product would be, notes, right? Like notes on what that minutes from those meetings, so on and so forth. Minutes, dates, times, those kinds of things.
Yeah, study questions if you created them. Yeah.
Questions, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those things where this is a leadership opportunity. So you yourself are not necessarily the one drafting all the questions or necessarily leading the discussion, but creating the capacity within the organization to have these discussions and to hold that space for these things to happen.
Yeah, I was just thinking here, Brendan is your natural lead on this, right?
Mhm.
Exactly.
He's your liaison to the school committee subcommittee. So, I'm sure he already has like questions and thought-provoking ideas in mind here.
Yeah. This ties right back into his wheelhouse as well.
Yep. The second one, I would say, conduct a book study using unconscious bias in schools, right? That's the name of this book.
And here, if Brendan feels overloaded, maybe you have a principal who's already read it or a principal that's passionate in this area, and they're your lead on the book study.
Yep. If we scroll down.
This may be beyond the scope of what you can do in terms of effective assessment without help in the district, but I'm more interested in understanding downstream whether it's effective rather than whether the administrators believe it's effective, right? So like that, so it's assessing their beliefs is an indirect assessment, whereas assessing the actual effectiveness is a direct assessment. That could be hard to do, so maybe we can't do that right now, but I just wanted to throw that on the table.
I think that would be something that would be part of a longer term plan, Ken, because I think that's where you would really see whether or not this was effective in the first place. I agree, though.
One might argue that if you're going to assess effectiveness of this event, what you might do in the first year, and I mean, again, this might be beyond the scope of what you have time to do, but you might want some sort of baseline measurement. And I don't know what that baseline measurement is. If there's something that's already out there, you know, if there's like, I know the Harvard unconscious bias thing is not really meant to be an assessment tool. But and you'd be reluctant to want to write the numbers down because it's not really meant to be used that way. But and I'm not saying you need to change it now. I'm just saying I think that you want the assessment starts with a baseline, right?
Yep.
You know, has this made a difference? But
no, that's a really good point. I think that would be something that would probably come back if I was looking, you know, to kind of scroll down to the preliminary, you know, like a multi-year plan in reference to how this plays out, and you know, that plan would probably incorporate action steps that have those types of assessments built in. And again, I think the partnership with you know, the group we're looking at, they have many of these tools already developed.
So in ways, I guess I almost wonder what the value of that bullet point is, because if we're just going to ask them, so what do you think of that?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's okay. I just don't know. They're probably going to be like, it was great. So I'm not sure that, you know, that there's, I don't know, there's a lot of steps. I don't know if that one to me is value added, but people might disagree.
I hear what you're saying with that. I think, you know, when we'd looked at this, because this goal kind of goes back last year and wasn't completed, you know, as we kind of hit the pandemic. You know, when we had first talked about assessing the administrators, it was more around their, you know, understanding of unconscious bias and so forth. But again, I didn't want to put that out there because, you know, as we've, you know, looked at this process, we're really trying to have people have an understanding of it, but not necessarily kind of say, okay, do you really understand it? Do you not really understand it? It's really giving them a baseline for which to start working through kind of this process that'll take years to kind of to develop and kind of finalize. So I'm that can come out. That's
Could I make a suggestion here?
Sure.
And now you're talking about taking it out, and I agree with that, but perhaps replacing it with maybe just a brainstorm from the administration on what inspiration they got from this discussion. Like how do they see it? And it's of course going to be anecdotal. It's not going to give us necessarily any data, but just some ideas on what they would passionately want to take forward from that conversation. Like, would they want to bring it to their staff? Would they want to, you know, see it transform? How would they like to see it transform their school building and so on? So I'm just wondering if there's some narrative feedback that that they could provide that might, you know, give us some indicators on sort of some weaknesses within our district. Where are some needs for moving forward? So,
and that doesn't have to be hard.
Based on that.
No.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead,
Kelly.
You know, maybe, you know, after participating in the book study, if you had administrators reflect on, you know, for their buildings, what do they see as some of the next steps, or maybe even just what their next step is, and then that would kind of inform your multi-year plan.
Yeah.
And that could be as easy as a minute paper at the end of a meeting. It doesn't have to be a greatly in-depth thing. You know, if you do like a minute paper in like something like PolyV, it can even make a word cloud for you like automatically, right? And you can get a sense of what's happening, and it could take literally like 3 minutes to get that feedback. Then you have it, right?
I like that.
and that's, you know, again, that's just another opportunity for you to kind of step in and say, you know, where would you like your community, your building to go in the next steps, and building that capacity, you know, inspiring that creativity and innovation within the school leadership.
Okay. That's a good pickup. And then, the rest of this is just tying back the, working with, creating that partnership, looking at developing a long-term plan, and then having the multi-year plan created, by June.
I'm never one to discourage like enthusiasm. It strikes me that hiring a consultant in March to have a multi-year plan of value in June seems super optimistic. I mean,
Maybe 2021, not 2020 anymore. So the possibilities are endless.
I don't know
So
what
true.
other people think. I mean,
They're looking my Zen lately. I think anything is possible. It does seem like a big task, but I mean, this is what these people do. Like, and I'm kind of familiar with their processes. Like, they turn these things out. Not to say that they're boilerplate and they're going to be specific towards our district, but this is not just like someone from Teachers 21 coming in for a little bit of help. Like, I think the people that you're looking at, because I'm going through a similar process right now. Like, this is their job is diversity.
And they'll produce something. Yeah, the turnaround time is pretty quick, and I think it's just a matter of assessing what works, getting back together with them, looking at the model, how that kind of plays out, looking at the financial aspects of it, because again, typically, when you're talking about a multi-year connection with any type of group, it's a costly endeavor in the sense that of the overall cost. The annual costs typically aren't too bad though.
A preliminary multi-year plan too. So even if it was just a draft by June, that
Exactly.
still, I think it works.
yeah, that word is fine. I just want to make sure that we're doing it right, right? And because it's important, but I think preliminary makes me feel better. We're not a district that is fast with plans,
Right.
So it's not our history. But anyway,
Temper expectations, correct?
make realistic expectations for something that's important,
Yes.
and don't over promise.
Yep. Okay. I think this works. Preliminary multi-year plans. District improvement, establish and initiate a process to develop a new strategic plan. Very straightforward and simple. This is one whether or not, I mean, we could come back to this because and we can talk about this. This might not be one that we really necessarily need to put out there as a goal. I mean, this can be something that I kind of pull together anyway, because I'll be doing it no matter what. I mean, a lot of these are those types of things anyway, but whether or not this is goal worthy, that's kind of my question.
Man, I feel like this is like saying like the regional agreement, right? Like we're gonna work on the regional agreement and a strategic plan, and we're gonna make a budget. Like I feel like we have to do this. This is not something that's optional.
Right.
I think
there's no like innovative way to do it. Like, what's the coolest new way to do a strategic plan? Like, I don't think there is one.
the 4 parts of this, I think parts 2, 3, and 4, to me, I totally agree. I think part 1 is a big thing. Like, I think doing a current state analysis of the current strategic plan by March is optimistic. I mean, I almost wonder if that's really part of like the thing you do next year when you do the new plan.
Right.
Because I just think a real thorough current state analysis with assessment, did it work? Did it not work? Where are we? Where are we on all of our plans? Oh my gosh. I mean, that bullet points a lot. And that's definitely goal worthy. The rest of it, I agree, is kind of like make a committee and hire a consultant. But I don't know what people think about that.
I agree, Ken. The reporting out on the status of the strategic plan is going to take an awful long time, which is why I pushed it off to March. But even that, I think that is a lofty goal to get there that quickly. And again, whether or not when you're looking at the entire process, we're talking about 5 years. So we're talking about a lot of information that we're going to have to delve into and kind of process and then report out on. And you know, that could be I'm assuming a very lengthy report. So that might be part of the process that occurs as we bring in the group anyway.
In another world, I am leading an institution-wide strategic planning process. And the first part of our process, now that we've appointed committees, is what we call a current state analysis, right?
Right.
I do think that's the work of the committee. I don't necessarily think that has to, I mean, you're going to have to give them information, but you know, if you could charge them to do it and provide them the information. I don't know.
Right. So maybe, okay, why don't, if people don't object, why don't I just pass over this one for now? If that's okay?
Sure.
Okay. June of 2021, superintendent will establish and implement a system that enhances communication between home and school for all families and school-age children who reside within the district. Again, this is that communication goal. One of the things that I've been doing with Mary Mead Montague is looking at a communication plan, you know, ultimately how that will work for the district. And, you know, Ken, you know, again, pointed me back to the DESI. It's like an app, really, but it's the building blocks of equitable remote learning. It's an online program, and it basically, and actually, you know what? I can actually share this. Oh, can I? If I click on a tab, can you
Depends
see
on how you shared it.
Is it working?
No.
No, I think you didn't share your screen. You just shared a tab. So there you go.
Okay. So again, you know, building blocks of equitable remote learning. So this really plays out for you know, a district, what the plan is, and again, this is, you can go through and look at all the different items associated with the communication, and then you put in, you know, your assets, your gaps, insights, other examples, pull it all together, and you have kind of a nice way to kind of pull your communication plan into play in a way that's, I think, succinct and really thoughtful. So this is a great document that I'll be tapping into.
And while it's written for remote learning, I think a lot of it in there is broadly applicable.
It is.
You know, like, how are you making sure stakeholders are heard and understood? How you're grounding your messages in the moment. I mean, there's always a moment, right? It's not just a remote learning moment, right? You should always be building partnership and fostering connection and community, right? Acknowledge difficult decisions, mistakes, and continued uncertainty. That's always true. Budget, whatever. So I think one thing for me with this, I think this document's really good. I still think there's a little bit of the remote learning thing, the remote learning thing tied into it. So I just want to make sure that this is a goal for you to be a better communicator and the district to communicate better, not just around this one thing, right?
Yes.
Which is why I think it's a professional practice goal, right?
Yep.
Because, and not just a district improvement goal.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think this is applicable to more than just remote learning. I think it really covers a much broader area. So, you know, after going through this, I looked at this a few weeks ago, but after going through it again today, it really gives, you know, more details, you know, around what we're focusing on. So, let's see if I go back to this. Nope. Sorry. Okay, is that back on?
Mm-hmm.
So again, what I did was I took some of the questions directly from the remote learning or the communication plan and put them into this document in terms of action steps. And, you know, again, bringing in school admin, staff, families, talking about consistent, trusted information updated regularly. That goes back into, you know, what we'll be doing. work with the administrative team on development of a communication plan and share with the full committee. So, and the community. Again, I think this is one that will be, it's timely in the sense as one of the things that we've been talking about, and I've been speaking specifically about with Mary, and she said it to me with a couple of team members today, is she's like, well, I thought Worcester was short on staff, but she's like, you're really short on administrative support, but we still have to be able to have, if not a point person, a communication plan that points out, here are the things that are going on. Here's the information that's being put out there, and we have to be proactive about it. So how we go about doing that, and what we do to have a plan of action associated with this moving forward. So it's not just now, but it's around, okay, do we have monthly roundtables where we take questions? Do principals hold the same thing in their buildings? What are the expectations from around teachers communicating, having two-way communication as well? So all of those are items associated with what we're looking at for our communication plan.
And you can't predict the outcome, right, of
Right.
the study. I will say that there have been members of the school committee, not me, but I don't disagree with them, who have pushed for you to advocate in your budget. You might not get it right away, for having some sort of, not a PR sounds like the wrong word, but like a communications czar, right? Yeah. So someone who can maintain the social media presence, someone who can maybe go to some of these meetings for you. Like, you meet with all these X, Y, and Z people in all the towns. It's great, but maybe every once in a while you can send your communications person. Or that person could like build alumni, could build fundraising capacity, there's lots of things that could come off of your plate and let you focus on more strategic things. If a operations kind of / communications person came out of it, I'm not saying preordain that, but that could be an ask that comes out of this potentially.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Yeah, I'm writing that down. Someone that is able to have that as part of their position, I think, is very important for a district our size.
Yeah.
In Worcester, it's probably a full-time job. For us, it probably can't be, but it could at least be part of a job, as you say.
Well,
right?
yeah, exactly. It can be part of a position, and again, you could have someone. I've talked about this with you, Ken. You have your, maybe the director of operations position is also the head communication person. So, that position really has, holds more than one hat, and that could be something that could be feasible for a district our size pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other questions on these?
So I just, that third action step.
Yep.
So I would propose that changes. I don't know how we can measure that you ensure that there's one. I just don't, that word just kind of stuck out as something that needed changing. So I would propose something to the effect of identify the primary source of information and outline the systems and organization of distribution. So identify the primary source of information and outline the system and organization of distribution. And I would say that those things would include not only who is responsible for what, but also the timeline that they might have to act on. So if, like, for example, speaking from a teacher's perspective, okay, a teacher gets a communication, well, they should be responding within 24 to 48 hours, right? We give that timeline. So if principal has information that needs to go out, what's the timeline for distribution? If the superintendent has information that needs to go out, what's the timeline? What's the mechanism? Is it social media? Is it website? Is it email? And outline that. Maybe a tree diagram or something is an outcome for that. That's really not my wheelhouse, but I'm just thinking some schematic that shows who is responsible for what action and for how long that's going to, it's going to take to get that out.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. I'm good with that.
I like those words. I think one thing that the primary source of information also, I think in there is some consistency. So it's not like, one school gets this and the other school here's nothing.
Right.
Now, but structurally, I guess my question is, I like those words and I please keep them. I wonder if that is really like a subset of your fourth bullet, because it seems like that would be part of the communication plan rather than something that came ahead of the communication plan. So for me, I don't want to lose any of those words, but I wonder if it's just one bullet point: work with administrative team on development of communication plan and share with community, which includes identifying the primary source, because it seems like that should be a part of the plan. I don't know how that affects the timeline of when those things would be done, but
Well, yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it, because that should be part of the plan ultimately.
Yeah.
You're right.
So
if
maybe identifying and brainstorming that outline is one piece, and then drafting the report and communicating that report to the school committee and the community is the second piece of that.
sure. Makes sense.
Okay, so leave it as is.
Yeah, I think you identify that, and then it becomes part of the plan. I think that's okay.
Okay.
But it obviously will envelope into that plan.
Okay, that works. Then last but not least, by June 2021, district will create a plan of action that proactively addresses student retention issues in the school district. So this is the split from that other goal. And many of the steps here are similar to the ones that we had already talked about. I updated some of these that I shared with you today. Or yesterday, excuse me. And again, much of this is really around looking at, some of the reasons as to, why are we losing students? Why are students choosing other schools? So what's great about a tech school that a student might go to when they could go to our high school? What is great about a homeschool when a student could go to an elementary school? So what are the reasons? Because again, I think one of the things we want to look at is, I know this year is an anomaly, but it's still something that, as we move forward, we have a lot of kids who are homeschooled. Will those kids come back next year? We have a lot of kids who are at private schools. Once they get comfortable, are they going to want to leave their friends and the surroundings that they're familiar with? So we have to look at this pretty proactively. And again, this affects our funding as we move forward. So were there questions on these steps?
I mean, I agree it's an anomaly year, and we talked about this at our last meeting. I hear voices on the, no, that sounds weird. I know there are voices on the committee that aren't necessarily ours who will be very upset if this isn't part of the plan, right? Of the goals, because it's something that certain members have been asking for quite some time. So I agree with what I heard last time, that it might be a little skewed, like what we learned this year, because some people might be like, because of the pandemic, and you're like, well, okay,
right.
That's good. I also think, like, outside of your goals, the fact that you actually go to these people and are like, hey, what's going on with you and what can we do to bring you back? Like, I think there's a huge amount of value in just being asked that question. Like, to feel like, we know you left. We're sad you left.
Right.
I don't know. I think that's kind of important.
Oh, that you think of any corporation out there, they want to know why, it's kind of, it can be like an exit interview with an employee. It can be, hey, so why are you leaving Charter Cable? What can we do to help bring you back on board? So it's the same type of thought process around that. And I do think it will pay dividends for us in the long run, because, we're looking at this proactively, and we're also, looking at it in a way that kind of says, okay, we want to ensure that we're able to do something to help mitigate this in some form or fashion.
Can I
Uh,
offer a kind of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Linda, please.
I just want to offer maybe a cynical take, in that I agree that absolutely reaching out and just being asked is a big step in creating that community, and like pulling it back in. I have noticed some skepticism on the why the district might want to do that, that it's all about the bottom line. And so that's where I would just offer uh, that little nugget for whatever it's worth, of just, it's not like Charter losing a cable customer. It's about losing a piece of our school community, and that it's not about the numbers, it's not about the money. It's about that person, that individual that we want to retain and be part of that welcoming Wachusett community. So I just offer that because I've seen the cynicism out there that it's just about budgets, because it's such an outsized year for that. But really the focus is about the community and the public schools. So just
Right.
adding that in.
Yeah, no, Linda, that's a good point. And I think in the past when we've talked about this, this year, I think a large part of this, a large reason for this is because I think people are like, oh my gosh, we're losing 500 kids, whatever it is, 1,000 kids, whatever the number is. I think that concern has been raised to me on several occasions, just around what happens with Chapter 70. In the past, when we've looked at this, we're like, okay, so why are we losing kids to Francis Parker Charter? What's going on? What are they doing there, that we, can we replicate that? So our students remain our students. So a student in Sterling or Princeton that wants to have something that's, a little different, they can get that within the confines of their own school, and they remain within the community. That was really, so I hear exactly what you're saying with it, and I think that we can frame it that way.
And I don't want to take ownership of this observation, because many other people in the subcommittee have said it before, but I don't think you need to do very much of this yourself. Like
Right.
this is definitely a farm out task that you're
Yep.
providing leadership for, right?
Yep.
I mean, Brendan or whomever would actually be the point person or an administrative person in his office. I know you don't have a lot of administrative persons in offices, but I really don't hope that you're not like writing a survey here. Like that doesn't
No,
seem like it should be
that
your
wouldn't be
role.
the case. No, I agree. This would be something that I would be working with someone else on, and helping direct and lead. So,
I mean,
And-
go ahead.
When you do present this, Daryl, like for you to be like very circular would be very effective here. So like I'm like in my vision, kind of like how you brought up Francis Parker, right? Like if it comes to pass that like parents want more Chapter 74 opportunities within the district, or they want some project-based learning or a drama school, right? And that becomes like the big correlating trend, then that
Right.
relates right back into that strategic plan outline, right? You're like,
Yep.
okay, in the strategic plan, like we have to, what's essential to everyone who's left the district is X. We need to focus on this. We need to make this a reality. So I think in describing these goals, how they all kind of connect together into envisioning a brighter future for the district, right? That word vision and that word leadership. This plan is going to help you craft the vision to give you the ability to lead the district into a new era.
yeah, no, that's a really good way to pull it all together.
And give
Yeah,
you a
and
reason why you're proposing to do things, right? So
Yep.
like, we've heard about, to re-echo the cynicism thing, we've heard about the Chapter 74 from some circles about like, well, is it worth it? Like, is it financially worth the investment for the number of students we keep?
Right.
But I think, creating, okay, this is what our community is lacking, right? And this is why we want to make that investment. To channel Bob Imber here, if you hear from the kids in Sterling that the reason they're leaving the high school and going to Clinton is because they're so far away that they can't participate as part of they don't feel part of the community, then maybe the late bus thing isn't a priority, because we're not creating community amongst the students who live 45 minutes away and they can't, do sports and stay after for teachers. But again, it's not just about the money, right? Not just about keeping them, but creating a community where they feel welcome. Like say, there's always a reason to leave, right? We need to give people reasons that they want to stay.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So I feel as though we're in a good place with all of these. The only one that I am looking to modify, not even modify, it's really, I'll just exclude this entire one, the strategic plan document.
I don't think it adds anything to the picture you're building.
I agree.
And
Okay.
I think the picture you're building is this goal,
Right.
right? And I think you can express that the way Megan suggested by saying the way these all fit together is we got a strategic planning coming up. We need to be able to communicate, figure out why the kids are leaving, be a more welcoming community, and that's what ties these things, together.
Okay. All right. So are you all set with sharing?
I think so.
Okay.
And I won't be there on Monday because I will virtually be at NETCHI, our
Okay.
for higher level, higher ed in the ask. So they still share the same office apparently, but they can't be called the same name. So yeah, Vice Chair.
So Ken, what I'll do is I will put these out, clean up a little bit, put it out in my report in draft form. Then we can discuss it on Monday evening. And if it's set and ready to go and they vote on it, we're good. If not, and they push back around whatever it is, we come back and we talk about it. But I think does this group need to say we vote to support this now? Do you want to, we recommend moving forward with this?
I would highly recommend doing that, and also just in looking at the agenda, this might be the longest meeting we've ever held. It's going to be a long one, so I think. Sorry, Kelly. I was like in my head, I'm like, maybe I should ask Rebecca if we can start at 6, which I actually think I might do. So I think to have some sort of expedience to have your backing or potential backing behind it would be very helpful.
Okay.
Well, I would take a motion to recommend acceptance of the superintendent's goals to the full school committee.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there a discussion about that motion? Seeing none, Member Williamson.
It's not working.
Member Woodland.
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
And Mills, yes. So that passes unanimously. So that said, we have our next meeting is scheduled for December to talk about the mid-year evaluation. We will need another meeting if this fails, right? Hopefully, if it's minor like grammar changes, we can just deal with that on the floor somehow. But my recommendation to the chair and to the vice chair of the subcommittee is to try and like make an up or down vote. Like don't, it's
Yeah.
Maybe they can avoid micromanaging the goals.
Would be nice. So Ken, do you want to do we already have a date established for December?
We do.
Okay.
So unless there's anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Member Williamson, second. So Kelly, thumbs up. Okay. Member Woodland?
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Yes.
Mills, yes. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much. And we'll see you. Well, I'll be with you in spirit on Monday night for the longest meeting ever. I don't know about that, Megan.
I don't know. I'll shoot you a text when we're done.
Keep it going. Keep it going.
The one
It's
where
an executive session, man. The things that are in that, whoo, it's a lot.
the one where we hired Daryl went until 12:45.
Really?
Yep.
Oh man. All right, never mind. You can keep that title. I was thinking
Okay.
11:30.
All right. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye.